Past Now Read presents another entry in our anthology of stories that need to be told. Kitten on the Bench. Enjoy. If you have a story that needs to be told, email it to stories@pastnowread.com. Kitten on the Bench. She found the kitten on the bench. Prologue. I couldn't name him without his father. The baby was born early, too early. 7 weeks before his due date, on a night, the rain fell sideways and the wind screamed like it had something to prove. I barely made it to the hospital in time. My hands were shaking so hard, the nurse had to sign my admission papers for me. They took him fast. Straight to a unit full of quiet beeping and strangers with masks and words I didn't understand. I didn't get to hold him. I didn't even get to see his eyes. He weighed 4 pounds. His skin looked like paper. His fingers, curled tight against his chest, didn't open until day 3. They asked his name, and I told them I didn't know yet. I couldn't name him without his father, because that's how it was supposed to go. The two of us, together, arguing over boy names and old family favorites, writing them on napkins, crossing them out, laughing. But the war ended that dream before it even began. His name was Staff Sergeant Henry Blake. He was stationed in Syria. They said it was an accident, a drone strike, collateral damage they called it, like he was a broken window or a missed appointment. I buried an empty casket. By the time I gave birth, I wasn't whole either. The baby came home with tubes in his nose and a list of things he'd probably never do: walk, speak, breathe without help. They handed me a machine, a stack of papers, and a sentence I'll never forget. We don't expect long-term survival, but somehow, he survived the winter. Barely. Until the morning of his first birthday. He'd grown quieter by then. Limper, a little colder. I could feel it when I carried him, how close he was to slipping away. So I brought him home, refused hospice, lit every candle I had and curled up beside him on the couch with a blanket and a Bible I hadn't opened in a year. And then before sunrise, I stepped into the courtyard to feed the feral cats. That's when I saw it, a black and white kitten, small, still, sitting alone on the stone bench I never used. No gate was open, no door ajar. It was just there, watching, waiting. Act 1. The kitten stayed. I hadn't meant to knock. My truck backfired on the road and I figured I'd offer to fix the leaning fence while I was there. It was her husband's work, sturdy once, now weathered and soft, where the rains soaked deep into the posts. You could tell someone had once loved the edges of this place. She opened the door slow, like every sound woke something she wasn't ready to face. The baby was bundled against her shoulder, no movement, no sound, just an eerie stillness that felt like absence more than sleep. The child's head rolled loosely when she turned. "You lost power?" I asked, motioning toward the fallen wire tangled in the fence line. She didn't answer at first, just looked past me at the truck, then the road, then at nothing. "Fence is out," she finally said. "If you know what you're doing, you can cut it free. The line's dead," I nodded. Wasn't trying to interrupt, just figured I'd offer. Her eyes softened, slightly. "I appreciate it." The kitten was already there, though I didn't know it yet. It wasn't a meower. Didn't dart around like others I'd seen. It just sat, calm as Sunday, on the stone bench beside her walkway. Watching. By the time I cut the wire loose and propped the fence upright, she'd set the baby down in a crib by the open window. The wind lifted the curtains softly, revealing pale feet kicking once, then going still again. "I didn't think he'd make it through the night," she said suddenly from behind me. I turned, tools in hand. "But then the cat showed up," she added. I looked down. The kitten had followed me, black and white, thin as a rake, but clean. Its markings were strange, symmetrical, almost painted, a cross on its chest, or maybe I just wanted to see it that way. "That your cat?" I asked. "No. I don't know where it came from. It was just here." "When?" "2 days ago. The morning after they told me he might not wake again." There was no gate latch disturbed, no paw prints across the dirt. Just a kitten, sitting still, watching. I didn't press. She invited me to sit under the eaves and poured coffee, instant, a little bitter. I sat at an angle where I could see the crib inside, just in case. The baby didn't stir, but the kitten crept to the window ledge and lay down, ears twitching, body unmoving. "You got a name?" she asked. "Eli," she nodded. "I'm Ruth," I smiled, surprised. "Biblical pair, aren't we?" She almost laughed, not quite. "You alone?" I asked gently. She didn't flinch. "Husband's gone, army, drone blast. Came home in a flag box last winter." "I'm sorry." So was he. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that stretches when you don't rush to fill it. She looked at the kitten again. "I've fed it. Wasn't planning to, but it stays close, doesn't leave the porch. And the baby? He breathes easier when it's nearby. I don't know how else to say it. When the cat's close, he doesn't struggle." I said nothing. "You believe in that kind of thing?" she asked. "Faith? No. Signs, things we can't explain, scent things." I sipped the bitter coffee. Thought of nights I'd spent listening to wind whistle through split rafters, praying to feel something that wasn't guilt or silence. "Maybe," I said, more lately than before. She nodded like that was enough, like someone else saying maybe was more than she'd gotten in a long time. The kitten leapt lightly into the windowsill and curled beside the baby. The child didn't move, but I saw colour in his cheek I hadn't before. A faint pink, a breath that seemed less shallow. "You know animals do that," I offered. "Pick up on weakness, scent, sound." She didn't answer. We sat longer. Later, when I returned to the truck, I found a tin of leftover cornbread wrapped in foil in the bed. No note, just that. And when I glanced back at the house, the porch light was on, and the kitten was still in the window. Over the next few days, I made excuses to return, claimed I needed to finish the post right or brace the lower rail. She let me. We didn't talk much, not at first, but I noticed things. She kept her Bible on the counter, open always to Psalms. She fed the cats before herself. She never raised her voice, even when the baby wheezed hard enough to rattle his ribs. And every time that child coughed, the kitten stood alert, eyes fixed, like it was waiting for something it had seen before. By the 5th day, the child smiled once, weak but real. Ruth dropped the glass she was holding, didn't even try to catch it, just sank to the floor beside the crib and wept, like it was the first time she'd allowed herself to feel joy since the war took her husband. I stood in the kitchen and watched from the doorway. Didn't move. Didn't breathe. The kitten sat on the pillow beside the boy, paw touching his hand, and I knew something sacred was unfolding. Not science, not luck, just love, unseen and unearned, but present. Act 2. Quiet things that heal. The baby's name was Asa. She told me on the 3rd morning I came back. She said it like a confession, quiet and nearly invisible, as though the name alone could break him. Like she hadn't spoken it aloud since the funeral. Not the baby's, her husband's. I was sanding down the new brace I'd added to the fence when she stepped out with 2 chipped mugs and a plate of still warm cornbread. She'd added honey this time. I didn't ask for it, but I tasted it anyway. It made silence easier to sit in. She watched Asa from the porch, arms folded tight against her chest. He didn't move for almost a week. Not a sound. Nothing. Then the kitten started curling up in the crib, and it was like something stirred. Animals are drawn to babies. I know that, but this one, it feels different, like it's here for something. The kitten was watching her as she said it, still as a statue, head tilted, eyes steady. I'd never seen it eat more than a bite or two. Never saw it sleep unless Asa was near. Never heard it purr. "What made you name him Asa?" I asked. "It was my husband's middle name. He never liked it, but I did. Said it sounded like strength." I nodded. "It does." She turned to me then. "You said you lost someone." "My wife," I answered. 6 years ago, car accident. "Was it sudden?" "Isn't it always?" She looked away, blinking fast. "I don't remember what it's like to wake up without fear. It used to just be about bills, deadlines. Now it's whether he'll be breathing when I roll over." I didn't know how to answer that, so I didn't. Sometimes you hold space by not filling it. I spent more time there after that. At first it was for the fence, then for the porch steps, then the leaking spigot out back. She never stopped me, didn't pay me either, and I didn't ask. We fell into a rhythm. Coffee in the morning, quiet work, small talk, watching Asa breathe. One night, she asked if I wanted to stay for supper. I did. She made red beans and rice, told me it was her husband's favorite, said she hadn't cooked it since he died. "He was supposed to come home in October," she said. "Got killed in August. They said it was a mistake. Wrong place, wrong drone." I stared at the plate, not sure how to respond. She continued. "They folded the flag so neatly. I hated how neat it was, like death could be packed away," Asa cried then. Not a full scream, more like a rasping moan. She ran to him. I followed, stopping short at the nursery door. The kitten was already there, in the crib, its body pressed against Asa's side. The child's breath, which had gone ragged and fast, slowed, evened out. Color returned to his cheeks. Ruth scooped him up and sat on the floor, rocking him gently. "I think this cat is doing something," she whispered. "I don't care if it sounds crazy. Every time he starts to slip, the cat's there, and he comes back." I knelt across from her. Maybe he's just giving her peace. Sometimes that's enough to change everything. Her eyes met mine. "You said her?" "What?" "You said her peace. The cat's a boy." Did I? She smiled. "I don't know what it is, but it's part of us now." The moment sat between us, like breath on glass, fragile, reflective. Over the next week, things changed. Asa's color improved. He started grasping fingers, making soft cooing sounds. Ruth began leaving windows open during the day. The curtains fluttered like new lungs. She even hummed once while folding laundry. I asked her to let me take her to church one Sunday. She hesitated. "I haven't been since the funeral. Maybe it's time. What if I walk in and feel nothing? Then I'll sit beside you and feel it for both of us." She smiled at that, didn't say yes. But the next morning I found her scrubbing the porch clean and brushing dust off her Bible. We didn't make it to church that Sunday. Asa had a coughing spell. She stayed curled in the rocking chair beside him all morning, the kitten nestled in her lap. But she prayed, out loud. I heard her through the open window. "Lord, I don't ask for much. Just let him stay. Please let him stay." That night, I brought her a worn hymnal I'd found in my attic. We sat on the steps and sang softly while the sun dropped behind the ridge. Her voice broke halfway through, "It is well," and I picked up where she left off. It was the first time I saw her cry without shame. Later that week, we sat on a blanket beneath the stars, Asa asleep in a basket beside us. The kitten curled against the baby's feet. "I keep thinking," she said, "what if this isn't about healing?" "What do you mean? What if this is goodbye? What if the kitten came to carry him over instead of keep him here?" I shook my head. "That's not what's happening. You feel it, don't you?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, but it scares me. Sometimes love does." Her hand brushed mine then. small, cold, but willing. I laced my fingers through hers. "He's stronger now," I said, "and so are you." She looked at Asa, then at the kitten. "I don't know what it is," she whispered, "but I thank God for it." And I thanked him too, not just for the child or the cat, but for the healing I never knew I needed, wrapped in the quiet things. Act 3. Breath returns. I started noticing little changes before she did. The way Asa kicked his legs harder when the sun warmed the nursery window, the strength in his grip when I held out a finger. He'd follow me now, his eyes anyway, tracked my voice, smiled when I read aloud. It wasn't a full recovery, not yet, but it felt like a tide turning. The kitten was never far. It slept beneath Asa's crib or curled beside his ribs. It never played, never begged, never clawed furniture or scratched a door, just remained. I asked once if she'd tried to find out where it came from. Ruth shook her head. "If it was meant to be found," she said, "God wouldn't have left it nameless." We stopped calling it the cat, started calling him Elijah. It felt fitting. A quiet visitor who arrived without a knock and carried peace in silence. One morning, while Ruth bathed Asa, I swept the back porch. I found an envelope in the mailbox, handwritten, no return address. Inside, a single note. "You're being watched. Be careful who you let in." No signature, no postage, just ink and menace. I folded it into my back pocket and didn't tell Ruth. That same night, a truck I didn't recognize passed by twice. Slow, lights off. I stood under the porch light, arms crossed, letting them know I saw them. They didn't come back after that. I told myself it was coincidence, a prank maybe, but something stirred in my chest, an unease I hadn't felt since I buried my wife. When I returned inside, Asa was crying, loud and strong. For the first time, strong. Ruth met me at the door, wide-eyed, holding her child against her shoulder. "Do you hear that?" she asked. "Hear what?" "He's loud. He hasn't cried like this in months. Like his lungs finally woke up." The kitten wasn't in sight. She laid Asa back down, and the moment his body touched the mattress, Elijah padded softly into view and resumed his watch. Ruth covered her mouth. What if the kitten's not just helping him breathe? What if it's giving him strength? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. That night we shared our first kiss. Nothing dramatic, just a meeting of breath and gratitude on the front steps under a sky littered with stars. It felt like grace, and neither of us pulled away. We began spending every evening together. I fixed what broke. She cooked what comforted. Sometimes we played music, sometimes we didn't speak, but the silence was full now, lush, warming. One morning, Ruth placed a small Bible beside the crib, opened to Isaiah 58. "Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear." I memorized that line. But the next few days brought something else. Elijah began to falter. Not at once, and not in a way obvious to Ruth. But I saw it. The slowness in his step, the heaviness in his eyes. He began sleeping longer, eating less. His breaths shallow. I mentioned it once. "Maybe he's just tired," she said. "He's done so much." "Yeah," I replied, though it didn't feel like enough. The baby, on the other hand, bloomed. Crawling now, reaching, laughing. Big belly laughs that caught Ruth off guard the first time and left her crying in the hallway, clutching a dish towel. "He never made that sound before," she whispered. "He's healing," I said. "No, he's living." One night, Ruth fell asleep on the couch while I read beside the crib. Elijah lay curled around Asa's feet. The baby stirred once, grabbed a fistful of kitten fur, and fell back into sleep. I don't know how long I sat there, but somewhere between chapters I knew what was coming. The price, the trade, the exchange of breath. I reached down, touched Elijah's side. His little ribs fluttered beneath my hand. Faint, barely moving. I should have told her, woken her, shared the fear. But it didn't feel like something to interrupt with words. Instead, I whispered, "Thank you." And I meant it. The next morning, Ruth screamed. I dropped the coffee mug before I reached the bedroom. Asa stood at the edge of the crib, holding the rail, feet firm, smile wide. The kitten lay beneath him, on its side, still and cool. Ruth fell to her knees, cradled Asa with one hand, Elijah with the other. "No, no, please, no!" I knelt beside her, put my hand on hers. There were no scratches, no wounds, just stillness. Ruth rocked forward, forehead against the mattress. "You gave him life," she whispered. "You stayed until he didn't need you." I felt something hollow press into my chest, a mix of awe and ache, grief and glory. We buried Elijah that afternoon beneath the old oak near the stone bench. Ruth wrapped him in Asa's first blanket, the one he never used because he'd always been too cold, too still. We said no words. The wind did enough. That night, Asa slept deep and peaceful. No wheezing, no gasps, just steady, growing breath. We sat on the porch, the both of us changed. "He gave everything," Ruth said, "and we didn't even know why." "We know now," she leaned into me. "Do you think God sent him?" I didn't answer right away. Watched the shadows play in the moonlight, watched the branches sway where the grave lay. "I think love finds a way," I said, "and sometimes God wraps it in fur." Act 4. Laid to rest in the courtyard. We laid him to rest the next morning. The sky was the color of soft linen, pale, overcast, but not threatening. A breeze stirred the vine along the courtyard wall, brushing the stone bench where Elijah had first appeared. Ruth chose the spot herself. She knelt beside the bench and pressed her hand to the soil. "Right here," she said, "where he waited." I dug the grave with a flat spade and silent prayers. The soil gave easy, as though it had been prepared long before we'd arrived. Ruth sat on the porch steps with Asa in her lap, wrapped in a shawl too warm for the day. He was alert now, his small hands grasping Ruth's fingers, like he understood something had changed. We didn't speak as I lowered the bundle into the earth. Ruth had wrapped him in the baby's old swaddle, the one with faded blue stripes and a worn corner Asa used to mouth in the hospital. A sprig of rosemary lay inside, along with a folded piece of paper I didn't ask about. I pressed the soil back gently, patting it into place with my palms. Ruth joined me then. She knelt across from me and smoothed the mound with her hand like she was tucking him in one last time. I set a flat river stone on top. We didn't carve anything into it. It didn't feel right to. He wasn't the kind of soul that needed words to be remembered. That night, Ruth lit a candle and placed it in the windowsill above the grave. The flicker caught in the glass and danced against the dark, as if someone were waving from the other side. "Do you think he knew?" she asked. "That this was the end?" I turned the coffee mug in my hand. "I think he chose it." "Chose to die?" "No, chose to stay until Asa could live." She held Asa tighter. The baby rested his head against her collarbone, perfectly content. "I keep thinking about how he arrived," she whispered. No warning, no sound, just there, on the bench, like an answer I didn't have the courage to ask for. "You think it was a miracle?" "I don't know what else to call it." We sat in silence, listening to the crickets hum and the wind move gently through the courtyard vines. In the days that followed, Asa grew stronger. He stood for long stretches now, laughed when Ruth spun in circles with him on her hip. His appetite returned, His eyes brightened. There was no more coughing, no more blue lips, no more urgent hospital visits. He began crawling across the hardwood floor, chasing after the rattling spoon Ruth used to entertain him. Sometimes he'd stop by the back door, look toward the bench, and smile at nothing in particular. Ruth baked more often, sang while folding laundry, opened the blinds all the way instead of halfway. Her hair, which she used to keep in a loose bun, now fell freely across her shoulders. She had started walking the garden barefoot again. She laughed once and said, "I forgot what fresh dirt felt like." I smiled, watching her from the swing. "You look lighter." "I feel it." We didn't rush anything between us. The love came gently. It wasn't the firework kind. It was the steady ember kind, the kind that stays warm long after the world grows cold. We held hands sometimes. I brushed her shoulder once while passing, and she leaned into it instead of away. And then one afternoon, while Ruth was showing Asa how to finger paint on a dish towel, she asked me something I hadn't expected. "Do you think he'll remember Elijah?" "Asa?" She nodded. I looked down at the boy. His tiny fingers smeared red and yellow across the cloth, babbling to himself. "I don't know, maybe not in the way we do, but I think some part of him will always feel it." She smiled faintly. "I'd like that." On Asa's second birthday, we placed a small white flower on Elijah's grave. Ruth didn't cry this time. She just knelt beside the stone and traced a finger along its surface like she was remembering something no one else could see. That evening, Asa toddled toward the bench, looked at the sky and pointed. "See?" We looked up. There was nothing there but sky and clouds. "What do you see, baby?" Ruth asked. He giggled. "Cat." We both froze. He'd never said the word before, not once. We knelt beside him. "Where's the cat, Asa?" I asked. He pointed toward the bench again. "There!" Nothing was there. But the breeze shifted suddenly, carried a faint scent, lavender and something warm, something good. Ruth clutched my hand. "I know you don't believe in ghosts," she whispered. "I believe in grace, Bay," I said. "And maybe sometimes it has a tale." That fall, I sold the little house I'd been staying in and moved in with them. It wasn't dramatic, just practical. We were already a family in spirit. We didn't talk about marriage at first, but it came naturally like everything else. She wore a simple dress, barefoot in the grass. I wore my father's jacket. Asa walked the aisle holding a tiny bouquet of rosemary and forget-me-nots. We said our vows beneath the oak tree, the stone bench nearby. Ruth swore she saw a small black and white shape curl into the grass for just a second during the final prayer. I didn't see it, but I didn't need to. We visit Elijah's grave every Sunday, not because we owe him, but because we remember. Some stories don't need to be told out loud. Some stories just live inside us, in the warmth of a child's breath, the strength in a mother's arms, the stillness of a grave covered in ivy. And once in a while, when the wind catches just right, Asa will smile and say, "Hi, cat," to no one at all. And Ruth and I will smile back, because we believe. Epilogue. What remains? The years moved quiet after that. We didn't chase them, just let them come, one sunrise at a time, like slow waves brushing the shore. Asa turned 3, then 5. The doctor called it a complete and spontaneous remission, said he'd never seen anything like it. We didn't argue, not with science, not with heaven. Some things don't ask to be explained, they ask to be remembered. We kept the bench just as it was. The stone above Elijah's grave gathered moss in the spring and turned warm in summer. Ruth planted rosemary there, said it was for memory, said it was biblical, said it was holy. We never got another cat. It wasn't a decision we made out loud, we just didn't. Sometimes a thing fills a space so perfectly, you learn to honor the emptiness that follows. One Sunday morning, I woke early and found Asa sitting on the bench with his church shoes on the wrong feet. He looked out across the yard, face serious, brow creased like someone far older than 6. "What are you thinking about?" I asked, crouching beside him. He pointed at the rosemary. "He was little, right?" "Elijah?" He nodded. "Yeah," I said, "but his heart was big." He didn't speak for a moment, then said, "Do you think God sent him because he knew I needed help?" I swallowed hard. "I do." Asa leaned his head on my shoulder. "I miss him." "I do too." The breeze stirred the rosemary, brushing our knees like a quiet blessing. Ruth started writing again, short reflections mostly, pieces of prayer, little lessons Asa taught her by accident. One of them got published in a devotional, then another. Eventually, she compiled them into a small book. She dedicated it to the one who stayed until the breath returned. Every time she read that line aloud at a gathering or women's circle, I'd see someone reach for a tissue. Because even when people don't know your story, they recognize the shape of grace. Sometimes people from town ask why we're always in the yard on Asa's birthday, why we leave a saucer of milk on the bench and sit quietly beside it, like we're waiting for someone who's always late. We don't explain it, not with words, but if they stay long enough, they'll feel it. The peace, the presence, the way the wind slows as it passes through that space. They'll see Asa walk to the stone and smile, with a reverence that doesn't belong to children, and sometimes they'll ask, "Was that really just a cat?" And I'll say, "Maybe." Because it was more than fur, more than purrs, more than an animal doing animal things. He was devotion, wrapped in silence, sent with a purpose that had nothing to do with understanding. Asa's 8 now, bright, strong, quick with his feet and kind with his words. He plays the piano like he's coaxing something sacred out of the keys. The doctor who once shook his head now calls him a medical miracle. But we call him something simpler, ours. I still visit the bench alone sometimes when the house is quiet, when the weight of the world presses on my chest in ways I can't quite name. I'll sit there with my coffee and think about that limp kitten on the cold stone, the way he never asked for anything, the way he just stayed. And I thank God, not for the miracle, but for the messenger, because what remains isn't the mystery. It's the love that came with it, and the life that followed. You have been listening to Kitten on the Bench, produced and adapted for audio narration by Past Now Read, stories that need to be told. If you have a story that needs to be told, email it to stories@pastnowread.com. Please subscribe and hit that bell for future updates. If you liked this story, stay tuned for the next episode each Sunday afternoon at 12:15. Follow for more. If you like our stories, please tag with someone who may also like Past Now Read, stories that need to be told. It would really help our channel. Thank you. All content and images are copyrighted by Faux House LLC, 2025, all rights reserved.